Hello, Gene Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog. I'm going to start out with a comment that I got because it just so happens it's about a subject I was prepared to talk about today anyways. It's about, well, it was supposed to be a Syria blunder, a Trump Syria blunder update. I was planning to do one today because I hadn't done one in a while, but I got a comment on that exact subject. So before I go into my comments and some quotes I'm going to read from the BBC, I'll just answer the comment. So it's basically asking me, well, Trump this morning, he announced a permanent ceasefire between Turkey and the Kurds. There was a 5-day ceasefire that was about to expire this morning, our time, and then Trump announced a permanent ceasefire. So the comment that I got was whether it's time to respond about the permanence of the ceasefire. And yeah, it is, I guess, time to respond about the permanence of the ceasefire, which is that we don't know if it's permanent or not. As I'm recording this, it's been in effect for 6 hours. So it's a 6-hour ceasefire, and yes, credit where credit is due, the 6-hour ceasefire has held for 6 hours. Now, to comment on whether the ceasefire is in fact permanent, we have to wait. It's that simple. Permanent means forever. That's what permanent means. Obviously, we can't wait forever, though I would hope to live that long. I think, going on past experience of other people, that my odds of living forever, I would say, are very small. But I would say 10 years from now, if that ceasefire is still holding, then yes, I would say then it's permanent. Maybe even, I don't know, 6 years from now, 7 years, 5 years. There comes a time when you know that the ceasefire is permanent. But you certainly don't know after 6 hours. It's just an agreement. So I guess my first comment will be that Trump, I think, is making an error. The error that he's making is that he already announced at the same announcement of the permanent, we hope, ceasefire, that he's lifting all the sanctions on Turkey. He's doing the same thing that Obama did with the JCPOA, the Iran nuke deal, which is, as soon as the agreement was made, the sanctions were all lifted. No waiting period, no waiting to see if the sanctions were holding or not. I would have required at least a year because, as I've said in the past, and I'm not the only one to say this, Erdogan is not the kind of person that you want to trust. I don't understand Trump's affection for all these despots and dictators like Erdogan, who he was technically elected, but he acts like a dictator, puts his political opponents in jail. I'm waiting to see how the next election turns out, how honest it is. And then the further comment was that my angst against Trump was immediately and visceral. It was not visceral. It was immediate, but it was not visceral. It was, I think, based on reason, on what he said and what he did. And I'm going to get into that more as I go along. But getting back to the ceasefire, which we hope will be permanent, there is actually no reason for Erdogan not to have agreed to it. And in fact, credit to Trump, it shows how we could have avoided any American deaths in World War II. There were at least 250,000 Americans killed in that war, not to mention millions of other people. The deaths of every one of those Americans could have been avoided by doing what Trump just did with Turkey, which is to give Erdogan, in this case, but Hitler and Mussolini and Tojo, in their case, everything that they wanted. That's basically what he did. He gave Turkey everything that Erdogan wanted. What he wanted to do was to ethnically cleanse a 20-mile band of Syria along the Turkish border. Trump said, go ahead. And well, he didn't say go ahead, but this is the other problem I have with Trump, that he said he did not give them a green light. Yeah, that's true. Technically, he did not say, President Erdogan, go ahead, you have my permission now, my blessing to go in and ethnically cleanse the Kurds from 20 miles of Syria. He just pulled our troops out of there. That's tantamount to a green light. This is another point. I have to bring up a gentleman, Walid Fares. Now, Walid Fares is a Middle East expert. He was born and grew up in Lebanon. There's this photo now. You see this photo, but here's another photo of Walid Pheres with Donald Trump. He was actually an advisor to Trump during the 2016 election. So he is somebody whom Trump respects and has listened to, and even hired him to advise his campaign. The reason I emphasize this point is because, as I am going to do in this future video, I keep promising, there is a problem that I have with a lot of Trump supporters, is that they follow him unequivocally without any criticism, no matter what he says and what he does, which is why I feel in many cases when somebody defends Trump, it's a little bit unproductive to debate with him, because Trump could have said the exact opposite, as I'm going to show here, and his supporters, a lot of them, the ones who wait for 48 hours or whatever just to see him speak at a stadium somewhere, they'll support whatever he does. So it doesn't matter what he says or does, because a lot of his supporters will just support him, whatever he does. So getting back to Walid Pheres, he was asked to comment today on what Trump did. Actually, I should start reading some quotes here, and then I'll come back to Walid Pheres in context where it makes more sense to bring him up. This is an article from the BBC about Trump's announcement this morning. And just as an aside, I keep doing these asides today, I guess, I would recommend to everybody, try to read the foreign press, at least the BBC or even foreign countries such as France or the Arab countries or Israel. They often have English editions of their press, so you can read foreign press from all over the world. I would advise reading those because, number one, you get a different point of view. Number two, you often get news that you don't get over here because we have a biased press. So here is the article. I'm going to go through these quotes. I'll jump in with my comments and then have something at the end. So this is about today's announcement. Here's the headline: Turkey-Syria offensive, some U.S. troops to stay, says Trump. So right there, he was saying that he's pulling these troops out because, well, this is a good thing about Trump. Some people say I don't praise Trump enough, but this is something, and I said it in an earlier vlog, this proves it, where Trump, I think he's a terrible foreign policy president. I think he makes mistakes, but one of his saving graces, one of his unsaving graces, one of his non-graces is that he never comes out and just says, I made a mistake. But when he does make a mistake, when the people who have experience, who are more than just New York real estate developer, which is what he is. As I've said in the past, I lived in New York for 40 years. I'm a licensed real estate broker in New York City. That's what I do. I haven't met Trump personally, but I meet and deal with lots of landlords, so I know their knowledge of the world, and their knowledge of the world usually doesn't extend beyond the borders of New York City, often not beyond the borders of Manhattan, which is actually Trump. He started in Queens working for his father, who was a developer in Queens, and then he moved into Donald Trump moved into Manhattan because he didn't want anything. He didn't want to be a Queens real estate developer. He wanted to be an upscale, famous celebrity New York developer, which to his credit he succeeded in becoming. But the good part about Trump is that when he makes a mistake, though he won't admit that he made a mistake, he tries to find a way around it, and then he rationalizes what he did. So in his own mind, he's in denial, and he can say he didn't make a mistake. He can say he's not walking back a mistake. But what matters is the result. So we have here, as I just read in this headline, Turkey-Syria offensive, some U.S. troops to stay, says Trump. So he said he was going to pull all these troops out, all the troops, but some are going to stay. So we'll see how he finesses that problem. But just throwing another aside here, that I'm sure a lot of Trump's followers will, and as I said, I am going to vote for him. I am going to support him. All I'm saying is the guy is not perfect and he makes mistakes, and it does not do the country a service not to admit that sometimes he makes mistakes and then try to correct them. Otherwise, you give him free rein to do whatever he wants, and some of the things that he does are not right. So, quoting from the article now, U.S. President Donald Trump says some American troops will stay in Syria despite his call for them to be pulled out. So despite his promise, and this is what he said in the announcement today. He said he's going to keep some troops there. He said, it's wonderful, I pulled the troops out, I'm keeping some troops there. So, as I said, I leave it to others to reconcile those two opposite points. He said a small number would protect oil fields while others would stay near Israel and Jordan. Now, remember Trump's logic, and this is good. I praise him for that. He found a way to finesse not withdrawing the troops that he said he was going to without openly admitting a mistake. They'll still be in Syria. They're just going to be in another part of Syria. And Syria is not that big, so we're not talking about that great a distance. But he said to protect the oil fields, and others would stay near Israel and Jordan. Now, Trump's whole rationale for taking the troops out, for taking out all the troops, which now he's not going to do, just some of the troops, but his rationale was that America should only be in foreign countries when it's in our interest, that he's not going to send troops to Syria or anywhere else, but specifically Syria, to get in between, and I'm going to get to this in a minute too, not to get in between two forces that have been fighting each other for centuries, he says, Syria and the Kurds. So the question I have, what is the interest that we have in protecting oil fields in Syria? We are energy independent thanks to fracking, and again, credit to Trump for liberalizing our energy policies, for overturning some of the executive orders that Obama had put in place. So we have a couple of pipelines now that we didn't have before. They're now being built. We have fracking. We have drilling in areas where Obama was not allowing drilling to be done. The result of that, thanks to Donald Trump, again, thanks to Donald Trump, is that we're energy independent. So if we are energy independent, then protecting these oil fields, to me, it only helps, well, it helps whoever's getting money from selling the oil, and it helps other countries who are buying that oil. We don't need the oil. So you see the contradiction right there, that he says he's taking the troops out because we have no interest there, but he's keeping troops there to protect oil fields and to be along the Jordan and the Israel borders. Now, what American interest does Trump see in having troops protecting? And they're not. Israel can defend itself, by the way. Israel does not need, they've shown in the past they have a very good army. What they need is weapons, materiel, but they don't need American soldiers. No American soldier, that's to Israel's credit. We had hundreds of thousands of troops in Iraq, and we had troops in Syria, but we've never had to, except for just military training exercises, we've never had to put our troops in Israel in harm's way to fight with Israelis or to fight for Israelis. So I don't see any American interest in having American troops by Israel. Now I do see one for having them by Jordan, because we don't want ISIS and other bad actors going into Jordan. But this is a geopolitical policy issue in which I thought Trump was not interested since he's been president. He, to me, seems to take little interest in foreign affairs, in keeping obligations to other countries. He doesn't see any point in keeping our troops in other countries, he says, but he's putting troops along the Jordanian border. Here is the key part we're getting to, and to Walid Phares, who I mentioned a moment ago. His Trump's decision 2 weeks ago to withdraw U.S. forces from the Syria-Turkey border region drew criticism even from some of his supporters, such as me. Soon after, this is the important part, soon after Turkey began an offensive against former U.S. allies, the Kurds. This is the key point. Trump is saying, or he has said, Turkey is fighting the Kurds. We don't want to get in the middle. They are not fighting the Kurds precisely because we were there. There was no fighting. American soldiers were not being killed in the area between Turkey and the Kurds for a very simple reason, which is the reason that Walid Fares said. That, well, number one, the Kurds were our allies, so they weren't going to attack the American troops. But he also said, Fares said, obviously, that the Turks would not dare to attack even one American soldier, let alone 1,000. Those soldiers were safe. Nobody was going to attack them. Trump just didn't want them there for some reason, and this is the problem that I have with Trump and that a lot of people have with Trump, is that he just decides one day to do something and he just issues an order. There is no rhyme or reason. There is no consistent philosophy, and I'm going to get to that. I'm going to prove that point as I go along here. And by the way, to illustrate another Trump foreign policy success, well, I don't know what you've been watching this video on. I don't know how big the screen is, whether you were able to see clearly the photo that accompanied the BBC article, let alone the caption beneath it. So let me describe and read to you. The photo is of the American troops retreating, surrounded by Kurdish civilians. The caption beneath the photo, civilians pelt U.S. vehicles with potatoes. So there's your America suddenly respected around the world again. Well, not by these people that were hanging out to dry. So just thought I would put that in there. That's the respect that we're getting. Civilians pelt U.S. vehicles with potatoes. These are not enemies of the United States. These are the people who are, or thought they were, our allies. Well, you learned. You know, you live and you learn. Another quote. The U.S. president again defended his decision to withdraw amid accusations he has betrayed Kurdish-led forces who have been an important partner in the battle against the Islamic State group. Quote, why should we put our soldiers in the midst of two large groups, hundreds of thousands potentially of people that are fighting? I don't think so, unquote, he said. Quote, I got elected on bringing our soldiers back home, unquote. First of all, let's be perfectly frank here. Let's be honest. One of the reasons, the main reason for a lot of people that they voted for Donald Trump was because the alternative was Hillary Clinton. That was why for a lot of people. Now, if you're talking about specific issues, his big issue was immigration, to quote unquote build a wall. I don't remember Trump saying very much during the campaign about bringing troops home as a promise. Now, I'm not saying he didn't, but that's certainly not why the majority of people who voted for him voted for him. The big issue was immigration. Now, this next quote from the BBC is important. It's an important fact. Pay attention. U.S. troop numbers in the Gulf have reportedly increased by 14,000 since May, following attacks on Saudi oil tankers blamed on Iran. So he's making this big deal about withdrawing not 1,000 troops now, he's keeping hundreds of troops there. So we're talking about a few hundred troops out of 14,000 more that he has put in since just May, and following attacks on Saudi oil tankers. Now, again, where's his big interest for America in protecting Saudi oil fields, except that the Saudis are our allies. But guess what? So are the Kurds, or at least they were. Earlier this month, the Pentagon announced that about 3,000 American troops were being sent to, quote, enhance the defense of Saudi Arabia, unquote. Now remember again that in Israel, except for training exercises, and there have been times when we've had a few soldiers just manning Patriot anti-missile batteries. I don't know if they're still there because now the Israelis have a very good system of their own. But again, Israel doesn't need any American troops to defend Israel. Trump just sent 3,000 to defend the Saudi oil fields. Again, we're energy independent. Where is this interest for our country? I don't see it. I don't see it, put it this way, I don't see an interest there that we don't have with the Kurds. So I think Trump just wants to fulfill a campaign promise, even though by increasing the total number of troops by 14,000 in that part of the world, including 3,000 in Saudi Arabia, I think he just wanted one little thing that could just allow him to say that he's bringing the troops home to satisfy his base, who, again, I believe will eat that up. Just go along with that, even though just do the math. So I'm going to just consult my notes here, see if I left anything out. Well, Waleed Phares, one more point on him, because this was something that he said, which is a very good summation. Remember, this is an advisor to Donald Trump. He may still be an advisor, but he was an advisor to Donald Trump. He's a Middle East expert whom Trump trusts. Except maybe now, knowing Trump, he may have turned on him now because Waleed Phares said something uncomplimentary to Trump. But this whole idea of this ceasefire, the 5-day ceasefire, the permanent ceasefire that stopped all this killing, again, as the BBC said in that quote, soon after Turkey began an offensive against former U.S. allies, the Kurds. In other words, all this killing that Trump is so concerned about stopping, it began after we took the troops out, not before, not while the troops were there. So, as Waleed so well put it, what Trump did, he started a fire, and now he wants credit for putting out the fire that he started. I guess that's as good a place as any to end. So I'm going to end here, and as usual, thumbs up if you like this video. Share it with anybody you think would benefit from the video as well. Any comments? Put them in the comment section below the video. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Oh, that reminds me, that's what I left out. If I could find it here. I don't have it handy here. I got a new subscriber. So new subscriber, I wrote your name down somewhere here. I can't find it, but I'll try to look up your name next time. But thanks for subscribing. I appreciate your subscribing just as I appreciate the other subscribers who preceded you, and the millions of subscribers I hope will follow you. Welcome to the family, and I guess that's it until I see everybody next time, which I hope will be soon. And until that next time, bye.